What happens when a powerful CEO discovers his loyal janitor walks 10 miles every day just to keep a job most people take for granted? In the gleaming halls of Pinnacle Technologies, where million-dollar deals are made before lunch, the most important journey isn't happening in the boardroom. It's happening on the dark streets before dawn, where 62-year-old Darius Wright makes his daily 5-mile trek to work. When Harrison Blake, the new CEO tasked with saving the failing company, accidentally discovers Darius's secret, what he does next will change both their lives forever. But neither man realizes just how deeply their paths are already connected. The buzzing alarm clock cut through the darkness at exactly 3:30 a.m. Darius Wright reached out with a weathered hand to silence it before it could wake his neighbors through the thin apartment walls. For a moment, he lay still, feeling the familiar ache in his joints, a daily reminder of his 62 years of hard work. Another day, he whispered to himself, a ritual that had replaced good morning kisses since Loretta passed 5 years ago. The small apartment was cold. The heating system worked poorly, but Darius couldn't afford to complain. Rent in this part of town was the only kind he could manage on a janitor's salary, even after 27 years at the same building. He switched on the bedside lamp, casting a warm yellow glow across the faded wallpaper. On the nightstand sat the most valuable thing he owned, a silver frame holding a photo of Loretta with their daughter, Maya. In the picture, Maya wore her college graduation cap and gown, her smile bright and hopeful. That smile had made all, the double shifts and overtime worth every minute. Darius pulled on his worn slippers and shuffled to the tiny kitchen. His movements were practiced and efficient as he prepared his daily breakfast. A bowl of plain oatmeal and a cup of strong, black coffee. No sugar for either. Diabetes had taken his father, and Darius was careful with his health. He couldn't afford not to be. As the coffee brewed, he glanced out the window. The city slept under a blanket of stars, streetlights casting pools of yellow on empty sidewalks. In 3 hours, those same streets would be bumper to bumper with morning commuters. But for now, an unusual peace reigned over the neighborhood. "Going to be cold today, Loretta," he said to the empty chair across from him, continuing a conversation with his late wife that never really ended. "Maybe even snow by the weekend." He ate quickly, washing his dishes immediately afterward. Darius couldn't stand leaving a mess, even if no one but him would see it. That attention to detail had kept him employed all these years, while younger janitors came and went. By 4:15 a.m., Darius was dressed in his worn but clean uniform, dark blue pants, and a light blue button-up shirt with Pinnacle Technologies embroidered on the pocket. He packed a simple lunch, peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a reused water bottle he'd filled from the tap. Before leaving, he touched his fingers to his lips, and then to Loretta's photo. "Watch over Maya and the grandkids today," he said, the same words he'd spoken every morning since his wife's passing. The night air hit him like a slap when he stepped outside. His breath formed clouds in front of his face as he carefully locked his door and tested the handle twice. Break-ins weren't uncommon in this neighborhood. Darius began his journey, his lunchbox clutched in one hand. The first mile was always the most dangerous, past abandoned buildings where homeless people sheltered and corners where drug deals sometimes happened even at this hour. He walked briskly, eyes alert, staying under streetlights whenever possible. "Morning, Mr. Wright," called a voice from the shadows of a convenience store doorway. Darius relaxed slightly when he recognized Tommy, a homeless veteran who often slept there. "Morning, Tommy. You staying warm enough?" Darius reached into his pocket and pulled out an energy bar he'd saved from yesterday's lunch. "Doing my best." Tommy accepted the bar with a nod of thanks. You still hoofing it to that fancy place uptown?" "Every day," Darius replied with a small smile. "Feet still work, thank the Lord." "They ever gonna fix that old car of yours?" Darius shook his head. "Some things are beyond fixing. Like this country's healthcare system, and my '98 Buick." They shared a knowing laugh before Darius continued on his way. By mile 2, the neighborhoods began to improve. The broken streetlights became functional ones, the graffiti disappeared, and the sidewalks widened. Darius hummed an old gospel song as he walked, the rhythm helping maintain his pace. He thought about Maya in California, now a nurse with 2 children of her own. He'd only seen his grandkids 3 times. Plane tickets were expensive, and his daughter's nursing schedule made visits difficult. But they FaceTimed every Sunday, and Maya sent photos almost daily. His phone was an outdated model, but it did the job. He'd learned to be content with what he had. The sky began lightening to a deep blue by mile 4, the stars fading as the city gradually awakened. Darius passed early joggers and dog walkers who never seemed to notice him. Just another invisible service worker heading to make their world function. The final mile took him past coffee shops where lights were just coming on, workers preparing for the morning rush. The smell of fresh bread from a bakery made his stomach growl despite his breakfast. One day, he thought, he might treat himself to one of those fancy pastries in the window. By 6:30 a.m., a full hour before his shift officially began, Darius arrived at Pinnacle Technologies, a gleaming glass tower that rose 28 stories into the sky. He straightened his uniform, rubbed his hands together to warm them, and entered through the service entrance where his supervisor had long ago stopped checking if he'd arrived on time. The employee parking lot was mostly empty at this hour, but Darius noticed a new vehicle in the CEO's reserved spot closest to the building. A sleek black sports car he didn't recognize. Must be that new boss everyone's been talking about, he thought. The kind of car that probably cost more than he'd earned in the past 5 years combined. Darius didn't feel bitter about such things. Life had taught him that comparing your journey to others only led to unhappiness. He had his health, a job he knew how to do well, and a daughter who made him proud every day. That was enough. He clocked in, collected his cleaning cart from the supply room, and began his daily routine, starting with the lobby floor that needed to shine like a mirror before the executives arrived for their 8 a.m. meetings. "Good morning, Pinnacle," he said quietly to the empty building as he fired up the floor polisher. "Let's make you shine today." Harrison Blake loosened his silk tie as the elevator climbed to the 28th floor. He checked his watch. 6:45 a.m. The thought made him grimace. 3 weeks as CEO of Pinnacle Technologies, and he'd already fallen into the habit of arriving before the sun fully rose and leaving long after it set. The board had been clear when they hired him. Turn the company around in 12 months, or they'd sell it off piece by piece. At 38, Harrison was young for a CEO, but his reputation for salvaging struggling tech companies had made him the board's last hope. He sipped his artisanal coffee, purchased from a cafe that charged $8 per cup. The caffeine barely made a dent in his exhaustion anymore. Last night, he'd been reviewing financial reports until 2 a.m., searching for ways to cut costs without laying off more staff. The company had already been through 2 rounds of layoffs before his arrival, and morale couldn't survive a third. The elevator doors opened to a silent floor. Most employees wouldn't arrive for at least another hour. Harrison liked these quiet moments. No emergencies, no interruptions, just time to think. As he walked through the lobby toward his office, an unfamiliar sound caught his attention. the gentle hum of a floor polisher. He followed the noise and found an elderly man methodically guiding the machine across the marble floor in perfect overlapping lines. Harrison paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. There was something impressive about the janitor's technique, the careful attention to corners, the perfectly straight patterns. The man hadn't noticed him yet, focused entirely on his task. After a minute of watching, Harrison cleared his throat. The janitor looked up, startled, and immediately switched off the machine. "I'm sorry, sir," the old man said, removing his cap. "I didn't mean to disturb you." "You weren't disturbing me," Harrison replied. "I was actually admiring your work. You're here early." "Always am, sir." The janitor smiled, revealing a small gap between his front teeth. "Floor needs time to dry properly before folks start walking on it." Harrison extended his hand. "I'm Harrison Blake." "I know who you are, Mr. Blake." The janitor wiped his palm on his uniform before shaking Harrison's hand. "I'm Darius Wright. Been keeping this building clean for a long time." "Pleased to meet you officially, Darius." Harrison noticed the man's firm handshake despite his age. "Don't let me interrupt your work. I just came in early to get a head start on the day." "Same reason I'm here, sir. Different job, same idea." Darius smiled again, then returned to his floor polisher. Harrison continued to his office, surprised by the brief exchange. He rarely spoke with support staff, not out of snobbery, but from the constant pressure of executive responsibilities that consumed his attention. The morning passed in a blur of conference calls and emergency meetings. By noon, Harrison had resolved a crisis with their largest client, approved a new marketing strategy, and rejected 3 budget requests that would have deepened their financial troubles. He stepped into the executive bathroom to splash water on his face and found Darius carefully cleaning the sinks. "Everything all right, Mr. Blake?" Darius asked, noticing Harrison's tired expression. "Just a busy morning," Harrison replied, reaching for a paper towel. "Say, Darius, how long have you worked at Pinnacle?" 27 years this May, sir." Harrison nearly dropped his paper towel. 27 years? You've been here since before. It was even called Pinnacle. Darius nodded. Was Westmoreland Technologies when I started. Then became Next Gen Solutions. Then Pinnacle bought them out 7 years ago. "That's impressive," Harrison said, genuinely surprised. "You've been here longer than I've been in business." Darius chuckled. "Seen a lot of bosses come and go. A lot of changes." He paused, then added quietly, "Hoping you'll be one of the good ones that stays. Folks here need some stability." The comment caught Harrison off guard. This janitor had just casually expressed the exact sentiment he'd heard in private from board members and executives. "I'll do my best," Harrison replied, unsure why he felt the need to assure this man. Darius simply nodded and returned to wiping down the countertops. Harrison noticed how he cleaned under the soap dispensers, removed water spots from the mirrors, and straightened the stack of paper towels with care that went beyond mere job requirements. The rest of the day dissolved into more meetings and crises. By 8:30 p.m., Harrison was finally heading home. As he walked through the now quiet building toward the parking garage, he spotted Darius in the lobby, emptying trash bins. "Still here, Darius?" Harrison called out. "Just finishing up, Mr. Blake. Have a good evening." Harrison nodded and continued walking, then stopped when he realized Darius was heading toward the front entrance rather than the parking garage. "Your car not in the garage?" Harrison asked. "Don't drive anymore, sir," Darius replied with a small smile. "Good night now." Harrison watched through the glass doors as the elderly janitor adjusted his worn jacket against the evening chill and began walking down the street, away from the building. Something about the image lingered in Harrison's mind, as he climbed into his sports car and drove toward his downtown penthouse. For the first time in weeks, Harrison's thoughts drifted away from balance sheets and profit margins. Instead, he wondered about the old man who had spent 27 years keeping Pinnacle clean, only to walk away into the darkness when his day was done. Dark clouds gathered over the city skyline the next morning. Harrison Blake had checked the weather forecast and dressed accordingly. Charcoal suit, Italian leather shoes, and a black umbrella that cost more than some people's monthly grocery bill. He arrived at Pinnacle Technologies just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. By the time he reached the lobby, the rain had become a downpour. Water dripped from Harrison's umbrella onto the marble floor as he closed it. He was about to call out a warning when he spotted Darius already there, mopping up the small puddle. "Good morning, Mr. Blake," Darius said, his usual cheerful tone intact despite his appearance. The janitor's uniform was soaked through, his gray hair plastered to his head. Water dripped from his sleeves as he worked the mop. "Morning, Darius," Harrison replied, taking in the man's drenched state. "Did you forget an umbrella today?" "No, sir. Just got caught in it on my walk," Darius answered, wringing out the mop. "It wasn't raining when I left home." Harrison glanced at the clock on the wall, 6:50 a.m. "You should have waited it out somewhere." "Can't be late, Mr. Blake. Floor needs to be dry before the morning meetings." Darius smiled, but Harrison noticed him suppress a shiver. Harrison frowned. "Where's your car parked? You should have some dry clothes in it." Darius hesitated, focusing on a spot on the floor. "Don't have one anymore. Old Buick finally gave up the ghost about 3 months back." "So you take the bus?" Harrison asked, already calculating the nearest bus stop. "At least half a mile away." "Bus doesn't run early enough for my shift," Darius explained. "I walk." "Walk? From where? Grayson Heights area?" Harrison's eyes widened. He knew that neighborhood, a struggling area on the other side of town. "That must be about 5 miles each way," Darius nodded. "Good exercise, though. Doctor says walking keeps these old joints moving. 5 miles. In the rain. In the dark. Every day." Harrison tried to process this information while Darius continued mopping as if they were discussing nothing more remarkable than the weather. "How long have you been doing this walk?" "Since my car broke down. Can't afford the repairs on my salary." Darius spoke matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "But Grayson Heights, that's not the safest area to be walking through before dawn." Darius shrugged. "You learn which streets to avoid. Most troublemakers are still asleep when I come through anyway." Something uncomfortable twisted in Harrison's stomach. As CEO, he made more money in a day than Darius likely earned in a month. His car, the one he'd noticed Darius looking at yesterday, cost more than the janitor would make in years. Does HR know about this? Maybe they could adjust your shift times, or "I'm not actually a Pinnacle employee, Mr. Blake," Darius explained. "I work for Clean Rights Services. They contract with Pinnacle. Been that way since the company outsourced janitorial 10 years ago." "I see," Harrison said, though he didn't, not really. He tried to remember the details of Pinnacle's contract with the cleaning company, but came up blank. It was just one of hundreds of operational details he hadn't had time to review. "Don't worry about me, Mr. Blake," Darius said, noticing Harrison's expression. "I've weathered worse storms than this one. You've got enough on your plate trying to save the company." Harrison was startled. "How do you know about the company's situation?" Darius gave a knowing smile. "When you clean the conference rooms after meetings, you hear things, and people talk around cleaning staff like we're furniture. No offense taken," he added quickly. "Just how it is." Harrison's phone buzzed with a reminder about his first meeting. I should go, but he hesitated, feeling suddenly responsible. For this man he barely knew. Can I call you a cab home tonight at least? Kind of you to offer, but I'll be fine. Rain's supposed to clear by afternoon. Darius picked up his mop bucket. You better hurry. The investors from Singapore won't wait, even for the CEO. Harrison nodded and walked toward the elevator, his mind churning. Darius knew about the Singapore investors, a meeting that had only been arranged yesterday afternoon and was supposed to be confidential. How much did this janitor really know about Pinnacle's operations? Throughout the day, Harrison found himself distracted during meetings. While executives presented quarterly projections and marketing strategies, his thoughts kept returning to the elderly man walking 10 miles daily just to keep his job. During a break, Harrison made a quiet call to HR, requesting information on the company's contract with Clean Rights Services. The hourly rate Pinnacle paid for janitorial staff shocked him. It was generous. But when he asked what percentage reached the actual workers, the HR director couldn't answer. That's Clean Rights business, she explained. We just pay the contracted rate. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped as predicted. Harrison stood at his office window, watching employees leave for the day. He spotted Darius exiting through the side door, a small plastic bag covering his lunchbox to keep it dry. The janitor adjusted his cap and began his journey home, moving with a slight limp Harrison hadn't noticed before. Harrison's hand moved toward his phone, tempted to order a car service for the old man. But something stopped him. A sense that Darius might refuse such direct charity, might see it as pity rather than respect. Instead, Harrison grabbed his keys and headed to the parking garage. As he slid into his luxury car, an idea began to form. One that would require some calls and pulling some strings, but might offer a more permanent solution than a one-time ride. He watched Darius's distant figure for a moment longer before starting the engine. The janitor who walked 5 miles to work had unknowingly given Harrison Blake, CEO of Pinnacle Technologies, something he hadn't felt in months: perspective. Harrison couldn't stop thinking about Darius that evening. He sat in his sleek penthouse apartment, surrounded by expensive furniture he rarely noticed and views of the city he seldom appreciated. The contrast between his life and the janitor's gnawed at him. The next morning, Harrison arrived at the Ohi E Pridi office an hour earlier than usual. As expected, Darius was already there, carefully dusting the reception area display cases. Good morning, Darius, Harrison called. The janitor turned, surprised to see the CEO so early. Morning, Mr. Blake. Everything okay? Don't usually see executives at this hour unless something's wrong. Just getting an early start, Harrison replied casually. Hey, I was curious. I checked your file, and it says you've never missed a day of work in 27 years. Is that true? Darius looked embarrassed. Well, there was one day, about 15 years back. My daughter Maya graduated college, first in our family, but I worked a double shift the day before and came in early the day after. So technically, the hours balanced out. Harrison was stunned. Not even for sick days? Can't afford sick days, sir, Darius answered simply. And the Lord's blessed me with good health. Throughout the day, Harrison continued his subtle investigation. He noticed that Darius ate lunch alone in the break room at 11:30, before the usual crowd. His lunch was always the same: a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and water in a reused bottle. During an afternoon coffee break, Harrison casually asked Kimberly from accounting about the janitorial staff. Darius? Oh, he's been here forever, Kimberly said. Sweetest man. Did you know he paid for his daughter's nursing degree by working double shifts? His wife got sick, cancer, I think, about 7 or 8 years ago. Medical bills were crushing them. She passed away, but he never complained, just kept working. Harrison found similar stories from other long-term employees. How Darius had once found an executive's lost wedding ring in a trash bin and returned it without fanfare. How he stayed late without extra pay when the building flooded during a storm. How he remembered everyone's names, even temporary contractors. After everyone had left for the day, Harrison slipped into the HR department and reviewed the CleanRight contract himself. The company paid CleanRight $22 per hour for janitorial services. But according to payroll documents, Darius made just $11.50, barely above minimum wage despite his decades of service. The rest went to administrative fees and management costs. That evening, Harrison decided to follow Darius's route home. At a discreet distance in his car, he watched the janitor walk through increasingly rough neighborhoods, past boarded-up storefronts and graffiti-covered walls. About halfway through his journey, Darius stopped at a small diner called Maggie's. Harrison parked across the street and entered a few minutes later. The diner was nearly empty. Darius sat at the counter, greeted by name by a waitress who looked to be in her 60s. "The usual Darius?" she asked. "Just the coffee today, Maggie. Need to stretch this week's budget." A little further, Harrison took a booth near the back and pretended to study the menu while watching the interaction. The waitress poured Darius a cup of coffee, then slid a small plate with toast toward him. "On the house," she insisted, when Darius tried to refuse. "You're my most loyal customer, 20 years running." Darius nursed that single cup of coffee for nearly an hour, clearly resting his feet before the second half of his journey. When he finally paid and left, Harrison noticed he still added a $1 tip to his $1.50 coffee. After waiting a few minutes, Harrison approached the counter and sat where Darius had been. "What can I get you, honey?" Maggie asked. "Coffee, please, and maybe some information about the gentleman who just left." Maggie's expression turned protective. "Darius? What about him?" "I'm his boss," Harrison explained. "Well, sort of. I run the company where he works. The fancy glass building uptown?" Maggie didn't look impressed. "And what do you want with Darius?" "I just found out he walks 5 miles each way to work. Has for months. I'm trying to understand." "Him." Maggie studied Harrison for a moment, then softened. "Darius is the real deal. Salt of the earth. That wife of his got sick, and he worked himself to the bone paying those bills. Daughter turned out wonderful, a nurse in California. He's so proud, but misses her something terrible. Can't afford to visit much. His car broke down? That old Buick was on its last legs for years. Transmission finally went. Would cost more to fix than the car's worth, and he can't afford a new one on what they pay him." Maggie leaned closer. "You know what kills me? He never complains. Not once. Says he's blessed to have a job when so many don't." Harrison sipped his coffee quietly, processing this information. "You know," Maggie continued, "he even volunteers at the senior center on Sundays. Reads to folks who can't see well anymore. Man walks 10 miles a day, 6 days a week, then spends his 1 day off helping others who have it worse." Harrison paid for his coffee, leaving a $20 bill for a tip that made Maggie's eyes widen. As he drove home, the pieces of Darius Wright's life came together in his mind. A man who had given everything for his family, his work, and his community, asking nothing in return. Back in his penthouse, Harrison made several phone calls despite the late hour, to his lawyer, to a friend who owned a car dealership, to the head of human resources at Pinnacle. With each call, his plan took clearer shape. "Yes, I know what time it is," he told his final caller, "but this can't wait until morning. I need you to block off my parking space tomorrow. I won't be using it anymore." The marble floors of Pinnacle Technologies remained dull the next morning. Empty trash bins overflowed, and dust gathered on the reception desk. By 8:30 a.m., 3 different employees had called facilities management to report that something was wrong. "Where's Darius?" asked Monica from marketing, frowning at her unwiped desk. "He's never missed a day in all the years I've worked here." The facilities manager looked equally confused. "He didn't call in sick. Didn't call at all." Word spread quickly through the building. Darius Wright was missing. The janitor's absence created more disruption than anyone would have predicted. The morning meeting had to be relocated when executives found the conference room untouched since yesterday's session. The CEO's assistant complained about coffee rings on her desk. The bathrooms ran out of paper towels before noon, but beneath the inconvenience lay genuine concern. Darius wasn't just reliable, he was a fixture, as permanent as the building itself. "Maybe he got mugged walking through Grayson Heights," suggested an IT technician during lunch. "I've heard it's getting worse over there." "My cousin lives near there," added an accountant. "Said there was police activity last night. Do you think Darius is okay?" By mid-afternoon, rumors had multiplied. Someone from legal claimed they'd be heard Darius had suffered a heart attack. A receptionist was certain he'd been hit by a car crossing the highway. The head of human resources tried calling Darius's emergency contact, his daughter in California, but couldn't reach her. "Has anyone seen Mr. Blake today?" asked the HR director, realizing the CEO was also nowhere to be found. "He might want to send flowers or something if Darius is in the hospital." "He canceled all his meetings," his assistant explained. "Said something came up that couldn't wait. Hasn't answered his phone all day." The absence of both the company's newest executive and its longest-serving employee on the same day struck everyone as strange, but no one connected the two events. Why would the CEO, who made more money in a week than Darius made in a year, have anything to do with a missing janitor? By late afternoon, the operations manager finally received a text from Darius's supervisor at Clean Right Services. Wright requested emergency personal day. Will return tomorrow. Replacement unavailable. Sapripu. Message created more questions than answers. Darius had never taken a personal day, emergency or otherwise, in 27 years. What could possibly have happened? The building felt different without him. Employees who had barely noticed Darius for years suddenly realized how much his presence contributed to their daily comfort. The woman who refilled the coffee machine commented that Darius always made sure she had fresh filters. The security guard mentioned that Darius would de-ice the walkway in winter before anyone arrived. "It's like when the electricity goes out," observed a programmer. "You don't appreciate it until it's gone." As the workday ended, employees left, with uncomfortable feelings. Some felt guilty for not knowing more about the man who had cleaned their spaces for years. Others worried something terrible had happened to him. A few even considered organizing a search party to check local hospitals. "We should at least send someone to his apartment," suggested the office manager. "Make sure he's okay." "Does anyone even know where he lives exactly?" asked another employee. The question was met with silence. Despite Darius's decades of service, not a single person in the building knew his home address by heart. As workers filed out to the parking garage, they noticed something unusual in the executive parking area. Orange construction cones surrounded the CEO's prime parking space nearest the elevator. A printed sign attached to a cone read simply, "Reserved Do not remove. What's that about? Asked a curious intern. Probably saving it for some VIP coming tomorrow, replied the security guard with a shrug. Above my pay grade to question it. The building grew quiet as the last employees departed. The cleaning crew from CleanRight arrived for the evening shift, one person short without Darius. They worked inefficiently, constantly stopping to ask each other questions about the building's layout and cleaning protocols that Darius would have known by heart. Somewhere across town, Harrison Blake's sports car remained parked outside a modest apartment building in Grayson Heights, but no one at Pinnacle had any way of knowing that. The only clue to the connection between the missing CEO and the absent janitor was an empty parking space with a mysterious sign. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight, the employees of Pinnacle Technologies went home wondering if they'd taken Darius Wright for granted all these years, and whether they'd get the chance to make it right. The early morning sunlight glinted off something unusual in the CEO's parking spot. Employees arriving at Pinnacle Technologies slowed their pace, curious about what had replaced the orange cones from yesterday. It was a car, but not Harrison Blake's sleek black sports car. This vehicle was a modest blue sedan, at least 15 years old but freshly washed and waxed. The morning light reflected off its polished surface, making it shine despite its age. "Whose car is that?" asked a VP of marketing, stopping to stare. "And why is it in Blake's spot?" His question was answered moments later when the driver's door opened. Darius Wright stepped out, dressed in his familiar blue uniform. The janitor looked different somehow, standing straighter, his face a mixture of embarrassment and pride. Small crowd gathered as Darius retrieved his lunchbox from the passenger seat. "Darius, you're back," called Monica from marketing. "We were worried about you." "Sorry for missing yesterday," Darius replied, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention. "Had some unexpected business to take care of." "Is that your car?" asked the security guard, pointing to the blue sedan. Darius nodded, a hint of wonder still in his eyes. "It is now. Just got it yesterday." More employees joined the growing circle around Darius and his new-to-him car, asking questions all at once. Where had he been? Was he okay? What happened to his old car? Why was he parked in the CEO's spot? Darius raised his hands, overwhelmed. "Folks, I appreciate your concern, but I should get to work." "The lobby floor." "The lobby can wait," interrupted the operations manager. "We thought something terrible had happened to you, Darius. 27 years without missing a day, then you vanish. What's going on?" Darius sighed, then reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Maybe this will explain better than I can." He opened the envelope and carefully unfolded a letter, clearing his throat before reading aloud, "Mr. Wright, after learning of your daily 10-mile journey and your 27 years of dedicated service, I realize that Pinnacle Technologies has failed to properly value your contribution. This vehicle has been thoroughly inspected and serviced by the city's best mechanics. The enclosed envelope contains the car's title in your name, insurance papers paid for 1 year, and a gas card with a modest monthly allowance. Additionally, I've arranged for you to have my parking space permanently. No one who has served this company faithfully for 27 years should have to risk their safety just to get to work. This spot is yours now. You arrive first. You deserve it. With respect and gratitude, Harrison Blake, CEO." Silence fell over the gathered employees. Darius carefully refolded the letter, his weathered hands trembling slightly. "I still can't believe it," he said quietly. "Mr. Blake showed up at my apartment yesterday morning with a tow truck. Took me to Riverside Auto, where this car was waiting. They spent all day getting it ready. New tires, new brakes, everything checked twice. Mr. Blake stayed the whole time, even bought me lunch. The HR director stepped forward. But why didn't Harrison tell anyone about this? Darius shrugged. He said some things should be done without announcements or press releases. Said it wasn't about the company's image, just about doing right by people. The weight of those words settled on the listeners. Many had assumed Harrison Blake was just another cost-cutting CEO, focused solely on the bottom line. This gesture revealed something unexpected about the man they'd been working under for weeks. "Where is Mr. Blake now?" someone asked. "Don't know," Darius replied. After everything was finalized, he called a rideshare and headed off. Said he had other matters to attend to. People began checking their phones, confirming that Harrison's calendar remained clear, his whereabouts unknown. The mystery of the E-Tool CEO's absence deepened, even as Darius's was solved. Slowly, the crowd dispersed, heading to their offices with something new to discuss. Darius stood by his car a moment longer, running his hand along its roof with the care of someone who understood the value of things others might take for granted. As he gathered his cleaning supplies and headed into the building, employees greeted him by name. Some for the first time. The invisible man had suddenly become visible. By lunchtime, Darius found a small plant on his cleaning cart, with a card signed by the accounting department. The security team had pooled money for a steering wheel cover. IT workers installed a phone charger in his new car. Darius continued his rounds, cleaning with the same care he always had. But now his work wasn't going unnoticed. People stopped to thank him, to ask about his daughter and grandchildren, to share stories about things he'd done over the years that had made their work lives better. As the day ended, Darius approached his car with a sense of wonder still not worn off. He wouldn't have to walk through dangerous streets in the dark tonight. Wouldn't have to rest his aching feet at Maggie's diner. Wouldn't have to worry about rain or snow or summer heat on his long journey. He started the engine, still marveling at how smoothly it ran. As he carefully backed out of his new parking spot, Darius couldn't help wondering about Harrison Blake. Where was the CEO today? And why had he chosen to change the life of a janitor he barely knew? Harrison Blake didn't return to Pinnacle Technologies. The next day, either. His assistant fielded calls from concerned board members and postponed meetings with vague explanations about personal matters requiring immediate attention. Rumors spread through the office like wildfire. Some suggested he had been poached by a competitor. Others whispered about health problems or family emergencies. Meanwhile, Darius became something of a celebrity. Employees who had barely nodded to him for years now stopped to chat about his new car or to ask when the CEO might return. The janitor had no answers but accepted their sudden attention with characteristic humility. "Nothing special about me," he told a group of curious interns. "Mr. Blake just has a kind heart, that's all." But not everyone saw it that way. By the water cooler, skeptical voices emerged. "It's obviously a publicity stunt," declared a marketing manager. "The company's struggling, and Blake needs positive press. Watch, this story will be leaked to the media any day now." "Maybe he did something awful to Darius and is trying to buy his silence," suggested another. "Why else would a CEO care about a janitor?" Darius ignored the speculation and continued his work with the same quiet dignity he always had, though now he arrived in his blue sedan instead of on aching feet. On the morning of the third day, everyone's phones buzzed simultaneously with an unexpected calendar invitation. All-staff meeting, main conference room, 10 a.m., attendance mandatory. Harrison Blake, CEO. The conference room quickly filled beyond capacity. Those who couldn't find seats lined the walls or crowded in the IBE doorway. Darius was cleaning the lobby when the message arrived, and he hesitated, unsure if all staff included contracted janitorial workers. His question was answered moments later when Harrison's assistant appeared beside him. "Mr. Blake, specifically, requested that you attend, Darius," she said. "He asked that you sit in the front row." Feeling out of place in his work uniform among suits and business attire, Darius took the reserved seat. Whispers followed him as executives wondered why the janitor was given special treatment. At exactly 10 a.m., Harrison Blake entered the room. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes and a day's worth of stubble on his face. His usual tailored suit was replaced by casual slacks and a simple button-down shirt. The room fell silent as he took his position at the front. "Thank you all for coming," Harrison began. "I owe you an explanation for my absence and for certain changes you may have noticed around the building." His eyes met Darius's briefly before continuing. "Many of you have heard that I gave my parking space to Darius Wright and provided him with transportation. Some of you are wondering why. Others have created theories ranging from guilt to marketing ploys." Harrison paused, taking a deep breath. "The truth is simpler and more personal than you might imagine. 30 years ago, when I was 8 years old, my mother worked as a night cleaner at an office building across town. We didn't have much, but she was proud and hardworking, like someone else I've come to know." The room remained completely silent as Harrison continued. "One winter night, our old car broke down completely. We couldn't afford repairs, and my mother couldn't afford to miss work. So she began walking 5 miles each way, in the dark, in the snow." Harrison's voice wavered slightly. "After 2 weeks of these walks, she developed a cough. It turned to pneumonia. With no health insurance and no savings, she grew worse quickly. She died 3 weeks later, leaving me alone in the world." Gasps rippled through the audience. Darius sat motionless, his eyes fixed on Harrison. "I ended up in foster care. Eventually, I got scholarships, worked my way through college, and built my career. But I never forgot what happened to my mother, how an inability to afford basic transportation cost her life." Harrison walked to where Darius sat and placed a hand on the older man's shoulder. "When I discovered that Darius was walking the same distance, facing the same dangers, I couldn't look away. But what I didn't tell you, what I only discovered through research these past 2 days, was that this building, before it was Pinnacle, before it was Next Gen, when it was still Westmoreland Technologies, was where my mother worked all those years ago." Murmurs of disbelief filled the room. Even Darius looked up in shock. "Yes?" Harrison nodded, seeing their reaction. "Without knowing it, I had returned to the very place where my mother's final journey began. And Darius..." His voice broke slightly. "Darius had started working here just a few years after she passed." The CEO turned to address the entire room again. "But there's something else you should know. When I arrived at Pinnacle, this company was on the verge of bankruptcy. The board gave me 12 months to turn things around, or they'd sell off the assets. I've been working day and night trying to find a solution." Harrison smiled for the first time. "The day after I gave Darius that car, something unexpected happened. The Nakamura Group, the potential clients we've been courting for months, called to say they'd chosen Pinnacle for their global technology contract. When I asked why they'd selected us over larger competitors, their CEO said something I'll never forget." Harrison looked around the room slowly. He said they'd arrived early for their meeting last week and were impressed by how immaculately clean our lobby was at 7 a.m. He said, and I quote, A company that takes that much pride in their appearance must take that much pride in their work. The significance wasn't lost on anyone. The contract that might save their company had come indirectly because of Darius's pre-dawn efforts. That contract alone won't solve all our problems, Harrison continued, but it buys us time. Time we wouldn't have had without the dedication of a man many of you never even noticed until this week. Harrison turned back to face Darius directly. You didn't just earn that car, Darius. You earned our respect and our gratitude. And now, I'd like to announce some changes that are long overdue. 6 months passed quickly at Pinnacle Technologies. Spring turned to summer, and summer gave way to early fall. The changes Harrison Blake announced that day had transformed the company in ways no one could have predicted. First came the end of contract labor for cleaning staff. All janitors, including Darius, became full Pinnacle employees with benefits, retirement plans, and paid time off. Next, Harrison introduced a shuttle service for employees who lived in areas with limited public transportation. A carpooling incentive program followed, with preferred parking for participants. But the most significant change was the new parking policy. Spaces were now assigned based on arrival time, not title or salary. Executives who wanted premium spots had to earn them by arriving early, a shift that improved punctuality throughout the company. The Nakamura contract brought stability, and Harrison's management attracted new investors. Stock prices climbed steadily, and the bankruptcy threat faded into memory. The board, initially skeptical of Harrison's soft-hearted approach, now praised his innovative leadership. Through it all, Darius continued his pre-dawn arrivals, his blue sedan becoming a familiar sight in the prime parking spot. The only difference was that he now supervised a team of janitorial staff who treated him with the respect his experience deserved. On a crisp October morning, Darius parked his car and noticed Harrison's vehicle already in the adjacent spot. Unusual, since the CEO typically arrived an hour after him. "Morning, Mr. Blake," Darius called, spotting Harrison near the entrance. "Everything okay? You're here even earlier than usual." "Just catching up on some work," Harrison replied with a smile. "And I told you, it's just Harrison when it's the two of us this early." Their unlikely friendship had become one of the many changes at Pinnacle. Sometimes they shared coffee before others arrived, the janitor and the CEO discussing everything from company matters to family news. "Maya's coming to visit next month," Darius mentioned proudly as they walked inside. "With the grandkids. First time in 3 years, I'll see them in person." "That's wonderful," Harrison said genuinely. "The company apartment will be ready by then. She can stay there instead of a hotel." The company now maintained 2 furnished apartments for employees with visiting family or for staff who occasionally needed to work late. The idea had come from Darius during one of their morning conversations. "I still can't thank you enough for everything," Darius said, shaking his head. "Never thought I'd see the day when I could afford to fly my daughter's family here." "You earned it, Darius. All of it." Harrison checked his watch. "I have some calls to make. Have a good morning." Darius gathered his supplies and headed to the lobby. 2 hours later, he realized he'd left his special floor polish in his car. As he headed to the parking garage, he passed Harrison's office and noticed it was empty, the CEO's coat and briefcase still there. Strange, Darius thought. Walking through the building, he couldn't find Harrison anywhere. He checked the security monitors at the front desk with the guard's permission, scanning footage from earlier that morning. The recording showed Harrison arriving, entering the building with Darius, then exiting again 10 minutes later, carrying something small. The CEO walked around the building toward the memorial garden in the back, a quiet space dedicated to employees who had passed away over the years. Concerned, Darius headed outside. The memorial garden was empty, but freshly planted flowers surrounded a new bench near the back wall. As he approached, Darius saw a small bronze plaque mounted on the bench. His heart skipped when he read the inscription, "Dedicated to Loretta Wright and Elizabeth Blake, whose sacrifices made our journeys possible." Loretta, his wife's name, and Elizabeth must be Harrison's mother. Darius sank to his knees, overcome with emotion. He reached into his pocket for the worn photo of Loretta he always carried and placed it carefully on the bench. "I wish you could see how things turned out, honey," he whispered. "Our Maya's a nurse, saving lives. Our grandkids are growing strong, and I'm finally being treated like I matter." "You always mattered, Darius." Harrison's voice came from behind him. The CEO approached slowly, hands in pockets, giving Darius time to compose himself. "I'm sorry if this surprised you," Harrison said, gesturing to the bench. "I wanted it to be ready before your daughter's visit. I should have told you first." "It's perfect," Darius said, wiping his eyes without embarrassment. "But why put your mother's name with my Loretta's?" Harrison sat beside him on the bench. "Because they both sacrificed everything for the people they loved. My mother walked through snow and ice to keep a job that would feed me. Your wife fought through pain to see your daughter graduate before she passed. They never met, but they shared the same spirit." The two men sat in comfortable silence as the morning sun rose higher, casting dappled light through the garden trees. From this quiet corner, they could see Pinnacle's employees arriving for work, the company coming to life for another day. "I found something else during my research," Harrison said after a while. "Something I still can't quite believe." He pulled out his phone and showed Darius an old employee record from Westmoreland Technologies, dated 30 years earlier. And the name Elizabeth Blake was highlighted, along with her position, night cleaner. "My mother worked the overnight shift," Harrison explained, "from midnight to 8 a.m., and according to this record, her shift supervisor, the person who trained all new cleaning staff back then, was Samuel Wright." Darius finished, his voice barely audible. "My father." Harrison nodded. "Your father trained my mother, Darius. He might have been the last person to see her before she started her final walk home in that snowstorm." Darius stared at the document, memories flooding back. Dad always took extra time with the night shift workers, said they had the hardest job, working while the world slept. The full circle of their connection left both men speechless. Without knowing it, their families had been linked across generations, their paths destined to cross again in this building. As employees began to fill the offices above them, Harrison and Darius remained on the memorial bench, sharing stories of their parents, their childhoods, the struggles and joys that had shaped them. Despite their different journeys, one to wealth and power, the other to humble service, they had arrived at the same place, finding unexpected healing in their connection. When they finally rose to start their workday, Darius paused to touch the plaque once more. "My father would be proud," he said quietly. "Not of me, though I hope he would be, but of you, Harrison. He always said you can judge a person's character by how they treat those who can't do anything for them in return." Harrison smiled, glancing up at the building that housed the company he'd saved. Not through ruthless cost-cutting or clever financial maneuvers, but through recognizing the value of a man everyone else had overlooked. "The thing is, Darius," he replied, "you did do something for me. You reminded me why work matters, not for profit, but for purpose, not for success, but for significance." Together they walked back into Pinnacle Technologies, the CEO and the janitor, two men from different worlds united by parallel journeys, shared losses, and a single parking space that had changed everything. That was the end of this story. Where are you listening from today? If you enjoyed this tale of kindness and unexpected connections, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. Don't forget to share with your friends and family to help spread kindness and awareness. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can create the biggest changes in people's lives, just like Harrison and Darius discovered. Thank you for joining us.